Hey, yo, it's Johnny King. Welcome to another episode of the Johnny King Show. I'm yet again here at my kitchen table with another amazing guest, Marc Montoya. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, man. It's good to see you. Good to be here. It's a beautiful day outside, and
Yeah.
some of this nonsense is starting to subside. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
He is an MMA expert, trainer extraordinaire, and we met at the gym when I kicked your ass that one time. Remember that time? That was a good time. Showed
Yeah.
you a few things.
Yeah. He showed me a lot. Good thing.
How fast
That's
I could run away.
that's game here is to get new techniques. You
Yeah. I'm so talented at grappling.
know? Yeah.
No, not at all. But thank you again for being here.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We have mutual friends, and it was good to connect. And he's gonna be a future speaker at one of my men's meetings here in Denver. You have Factory X, your MMA gym.
Correct. Yeah. Factory X is located in Inglewood. We've been around for about 11 years.
Yeah.
I've been in mixed martial arts for about 22 years. So have some amazing athletes that I get to train, and we also get to train just regular Joes that are off the street, adults and kids, and just continue to spread the mixed martial arts. And it's been a hell of a journey, and I've had the opportunity to win world titles in MMA, and I've had the ability to train kids in our facility. So it's been a heck of a journey. So
Cool.
yeah, we're located in Inglewood, and I'm born and raised here in Colorado. So
one of the few natives left.
Agree. I know. I was just telling someone today, actually, who a student actually came in to grapple, and he was saying that he asked me where I was from, and I said, well, my father's family is from Southern Colorado. And I was like, man, they homesteaded there in 1850.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I know all of this because I did the ancestry.com stuff.
Yeah.
And they homesteaded right on the border of New Mexico and Colorado.
Cool.
And I was telling him, I'm a fourth generation Colorado, and he's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm from Alamosa." And so he was telling me, he's like third generation here, and I was like, "Dude, there's not a lot of us left like that."
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It's really, really cool. Excuse me 1 second. Little tickle in my throat, but maybe you could. I guess a lot of the things I want to chat about, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about your upbringing and what got you into MMA and what has been that was the 30,000-foot view of you getting to hear, but what was growing up like for you, and with a dad, without a dad, just because that's a conversation that I'm having often with other guys of like either they had great mentorship or they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the few men that I had that were good mentors, a lot of bad ones, but they were primarily coaches. So you being in that role now, those few men, because my dad was a workaholic, that really helped shape my life were some of my amazing coaches up and coming. So I can just sense it in you. That's a big part of seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, the pride you take in the work that you do, which is, shaping men, right?
Yes.
There's no longer that rite of passage, that we may have got from eons ago,
right.
But here you're really working with warriors who step into the octagon and they either kick some ass or they get their ass kicked.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, a little both.
What was your upbringing that kind of got you into what you're doing now?
Yeah, like I said, I'm from here and born and raised here in Denver. I grew up on like the Federal and Alameda area here in Denver, and it's still a rough neighborhood. That was a tough neighborhood when I was growing up.
Yeah.
My parents were 16 and 17 when they had me.
Oh wow.
So, you have that start. I lived with my grandmother. And just being in that type of position, in the proximity that I was in the sense of where I lived, the life started tough. It's tough in general. So,
were mom and dad there, or was it more you were raised by your grandparents?
So a little of both. So my parents were technically married for 13 years, but my dad wasn't around much when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He and I formed a better relationship when I was in high school.
Cool.
And having a dad in and out a little bit, and my mom, my grandmother, and then of course I have siblings. I'm the oldest, so a lot of stuff just fell on my shoulders, you know, in the sense of just responsibility. My mom was in a terrible accident when I was 8. She was bedridden for 2 years. Um, so you grew up quickly and
Forced to, yeah.
yeah, big time. And you know, you have a choice in that type of environment to not be tough.
Right.
And or if you're not, you're going to learn how to be. And
Mhm.
so, excuse me, because of that environment, uh, your hand's a little forced there to, you know, step up. And so
Survive or
yeah, exactly,
get out.
step up or you're done, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was, you know, there's people that have had way rougher upbringings than me, but that's mine. And you know, I've always, of course, MMA wasn't part of the fabric when I was growing up yet. Boxing was a huge deal, of course,
Yep.
and I've always loved boxing. And as a kid, I've told the story many times, but I doubt that your viewers have heard it unless they follow me specifically. But I asked my mom. I said, "Hey, I want to box," and I was around 10 or 11. I can't remember. And she said, "Absolutely not. You're not doing that." And so I was just determined that I was going to do that. And
What provoked that though? It wasn't like you were getting your ass kicked on the way home from school and you wanted to box, or was it?
I just love to compete. I've been an athlete.
Why boxing? Because that's like.
I think part of it is just the environment where I grew up, you
Yeah.
know.
So it was somewhat
Hispanics in nature love
safety.
boxing, love fighting. It was just kind of in the DNA, you know.
Cool.
And so I used to watch boxing on TV, you know, on Saturday mornings. You know, ABC would have boxing on Saturday middays and all that kind of stuff. And so I just loved it, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard and all of that era of boxers. I just loved that.
That's cool.
And so I wanted to box, and I played team sports. You know, I played college baseball, so I played team sports, but I just wanted to box. And I asked my mom. She said no, and I was like, "What do you mean no?" You know, and she's like, "Absolutely not. You're not doing that." So I told her I was playing basketball because, you know, basketball season was going on at the same time. And so I used to run the railroad tracks from Federal and Alameda to 6th and Inca. A friend of mine named Antonio, we used to run the railroad tracks, and we'd go box at St. Joe's. St. Joe's is a church, but in the basement they had a boxing team.
Cool.
And so we went there and we'd run, and then I'd run back. And if I wasn't running home or walking home, if my mom picked me up, you know, she would pick me up. And sometimes I'd have like a busted lip or a black eye, and she'd be like, "What happened to you?" It's like, "Oh, I caught an elbow on a rebound or something." And so,
was perfect cover because you could be like, "I was playing basketball," and she'd be like, "No, well then I was at church."
I was at church. Yeah, exactly.
It's like even better fallback.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I didn't think this through well, though, because as a kid,
you were 10.
Right? Exactly. As a kid, I didn't think this through. Other than the fact that I knew I wanted to do it, and I was determined, and hell or high water, I was doing it. So my coach, you know, I trained for months or whatever, and my coach at the time said, "Hey, listen, we want to have you compete." And I was like, "Hell yeah, I'd love to." And he gives me this piece of paper, and he's like, "But I need your, you know, parent or whomever to sign this, and they'd have to take you to the venue." And then that's when it dawned on me. I was like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna have to explain myself." Yeah. So, you know, the whole ask for forgiveness instead of permission thing. So that was essentially what I did. I went home. I was like, "Mom, listen, I have an opportunity to box in this match." And she was like, "Box? What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I haven't been playing basketball." And she lost her shit. You know, she was pissed at me, of course. And I was just like, "Mom, just let me do this," you know. And I said, "I've been doing it. I'm fine. I'm still alive. You know, I've been doing it for months." And so she said to me, "If you don't win this match, you're done." And I was like, "No problem."
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I said, "Great." So I went and won, and then that's essentially where it started is my love there. But like I said earlier, I played team sports in high school, of course, as an adolescent. I played college baseball, and then from there, I rejoined in training mixed martial arts after that. So in '98, I started training in Muay Thai kickboxing. So that's where I kind of joined back up and found it again. And then from obviously 98 until now. I fought, and then, now I coach only now. I don't fight anymore. But that's essentially how that whole thing started, was right there in my eyes.
Did you ever lose?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So your mom didn't hold firm on that?
Yeah, I won for a long time. So
if you ever lose, you
yeah,
go home.
yeah. She
Mom,
said,
I'm 35 years old.
I'm 35. I'm like, I'm gonna lose a lot. Yeah. No. So anyway, that's what happened in that's essentially the fabric that was laid down. I think it was environment, where I was brought up.
Yep.
And then just my love to compete.
Yeah.
I was never afraid to fight, because we fought a lot as kids, just street fight stuff that I don't know, I felt was normal. I guess it's not as normal as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
That's not as normal as I thought it was. But.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is we all grew up in what's normal to us. Whether it be, fighting or religion or our parents or whatever. It's like that's all we know.
Exactly.
So it's not until we get a little bit more world perspective do we realize, not everyone fights.
Yeah. Did you ever compete in a sport that was one-on-one, like wrestling or boxing or karate
really.
or anything like that?
No. I grew up playing the normal basketball, baseball, soccer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then even in college, I played 5 sports. I couldn't, I think that was my issue, is I couldn't decide. And if I'm really being honest, I was scared.
Okay.
I was scared to choose one, go all in, and to fail at that. So my excuse was, I'd be really good. I probably could have gone D1, but I was too busy playing basketball, baseball, soccer. I didn't have any off seasons to get better.
Sure.
Right? Where my other buddies that did go to D1 schools, they would come back after the off season and be like, since when did you get big and fast? Like, holy cow, right? But it was, and that's why I still kind of attribute it to, like, I wish, it is what it is, but I wish I would have had someone just sit me down and be like, hey, you've got some good athleticism, if you really want to do this, let's say as a 6th or 7th grader, choose one. What's your favorite? Basketball, baseball, soccer? Just choose one and just let's double down. Like, to give me some type of plan. If you want to go D2, D1, do you actually even think about you want to go to professional? Like, I just was so scared to fail, and I did not even remotely have close to the right type of probably winning mentality. I was way too soft, because I was raised primarily all by women. No, sorry, let me say that correctly. It's not that I was soft because I was raised by women. It just was it was that, win or lose, my mom was always there to say, you did a great job, you played so well. And there wasn't that like encouragement or that like warrior spirit. I had it in me, but it wasn't cultivated.
Yeah, you needed someone to bring it out.
Yeah, so whether I won or I lost, I always had mommy's shoulder to go home to. And that I ultimately felt like I underperformed as it relates to, all my life, up until like 30 years old, but especially in sports. I felt like I had so much more natural ability that I just didn't tap into because I didn't have that guy to take me underneath his wing and drive me, right?
Sure.
Which it seems like that's what you do.
Yeah, I actually noticed the quote you have right here where it says, what would you do? What chances would you take if you knew you couldn't fail? Yeah. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what it says. Yeah. Failing is a big deal. There's Zig Ziglar has a great comment about failing. He says failure is an event, not your identity. And it's easy to say that. It's hard to wrap your mind around.
Totally.
It's like, hold on a second, it's an event, not my identity. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I say that to my fighters a lot, because one of the things I tell my fighters daily is I encourage you to fail today.
Yeah.
Take chances on the mat today. Fail. Don't always do your favorite position, favorite move. Let's expand and grow our games, right? And that goes for life. That's, I always tell my guys, my number one goal is to help you become a world champion in life. Second is to be a world champion in the cage. And so, and I truly mean that. But to be honest, the first job is way harder.
Absolutely.
Way harder, because if we're talking about failure, the failing part is tough because you got ego involved.
Yes.
And when you have ego involved, if you don't know how to check that ego, it will then make you not take chances, like what you were describing with sports, or many people probably
Just
can
protecting
describe about
myself.
business or
Yep.
relationships
Total.
or whatever. And the failing part is the learning part. You know, you don't become a black belt in jiu-jitsu
Mhm.
by doing everything perfectly for 10 years
Mhm.
and then your instructor goes, "Wow, you did everything perfectly." No, you get choked thousands of times. You just don't quit. So the failing of the choking is the thing. And you know where most people stop their journey in jiu-jitsu? For your listeners that don't know what jiu-jitsu is, it's just submission grappling. So wrestling with submissions, and then if you were in a submission, you would tap to stop the submission and you restart, right? So and jiu-jitsu's roots come from Japan and then have migrated into Brazil and then of course over into the States
Mhm.
as all this has grown. So in jiu-jitsu though, it takes an average of about 10 years to get a black belt. So in 10 years time ish, how many times have you failed? Right? So
Yeah.
you failed so many times,
Yeah.
and that's how you've gotten to
Mhm.
that point, is to be called an expert.
Yep.
It's the failure part,
Right.
and most people's journeys stop at blue belt.
Mhm.
And the way the belts go in jiu-jitsu is white is a beginner, blue, purple, brown, black. So if you look at that, white is a beginner, blue is about a year-ish in, depending on how often you're training and the athlete person. But let's just call it a year-ish. At blue belt, now you're looking at purple, brown, and black. That's a lot of years right there. You're talking average of 10 to just get a black belt.
Mhm.
And to be honest, that's really where the journey starts.
Mhm.
It's not,
That's
I
when
got
things
my
get
black
hard.
belt, now I'm the expert. It's really, that's kind of where it starts, because now you've got all the tools to actually be really good. So stopping at black belt, that drives me nuts too.
Mhm.
It's like, man, you're at expert level, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you can't be unstoppable,
Mhm.
right? You're deciding to be good,
Mhm.
but let's be unstoppable in the sense of gathering information and failing. You're gonna and the other thing is, I, I have this theory that some black belts stop because they have a big X on their back now. Everyone wants to submit the black belt,
Mhm.
because then you're like, oh, I submitted the black belt. I beat the expert,
Ego.
right? And ego. And so that's my point. Is the failure part is a big deal, and navigating through that and mentoring men and women through that is one of the toughest jobs I have on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. And I think that is, it's like when you've got nothing to lose, it's easy to go all in,
Correct.
easier to go all in.
Easier.
It's a lot more challenging when you're, you know, Conor McGregor and you're at the top, and then you you get knocked off the pedestal, and then to actually fight your way back, it'd be easy just to be like, all right, I'm done,
Mm-hmm.
but you get that target on your back, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's gunning for you,
It's a lot of
so
hard work, and I don't know if you've seen the recent documentary, The Last Dance with
yeah,
Michael Jordan.
yeah, yeah.
Excuse me. That's the epitome of an expert at the highest level,
Hmm.
and everyone coming for him and his team,
Hmm.
and learning just how to be relentless and unstoppable and consistently growing and going
Hmm.
and pushing others to stay on the level that they need to be to become world champions time and
Right,
time again, right?
right, right.
And so sports parallels life a lot.
Yeah,
It's just because we're talking about a sport right now, it doesn't mean that that's not how life is. it's
right.
it's very, very similar.
And that's why I think there's so many cliches that you kind of grow up hearing, but at some point they start to really click.
For sure.
When you're like, oh, it's always darkest before the dawn. It's darkest, you know, like when you're black belt, you get all this and you think like, I've put all this time in, and now the work really starts, like,
Now it starts.
but
Yep.
that really truly is it.
Hmm.
It's like, um and just the whole point to what you said earlier, where like it's what Jordan says, that he's failed. This is his famous quote: over 3,000 times he's been given the ball to win,
Yep.
and he just missed that shot 26 times, whatever that saying is, and that's why he's the best, because he's failed the most.
Correct.
So it's just the challenge really is that intellectually we can listen to this, we can see it on social memes, it's like, oh yeah, it sounds really good, but
For sure.
operationally, actually invested your heart and your soul into whatever you're doing, whether it be a relationship with your spouse or significant other, or a business, or a sport, or with your children, it's like, man, that's when the rubber really meets the road. And I feel like that's where people bail out,
Yeah, they do.
you know,
They
and
do.
then you have that shame of like, oh, when the going got tough, I gave up, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I
Mm-hmm.
certainly have lived those experiences where I'm like, damn it, I
Yep.
had that opportunity and I folded, I
Yep.
gave up, you know.
Yep.
But then again, those are the failings
That's the
that
learning.
I think about now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my junior year in college, we were good in soccer, and we had I think maybe even like 5 games where we were leading going into the last 10 minutes, and they would come back and tie it, and then they'd go ahead and we'd lose.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we got after those games, we got ran into the field, you know, because our coach was like, nope, keep your boots on, boys. And I'm like, oh, damn it. But it was mental softness.
Sure.
We were playing not to lose ultimately.
Correct.
And once that momentum shifted, we were done for. That next year, we only lost 2 games.
Hmm.
And I was in the back of the defense. And our defense was solid just because, and I would just say at those games, like, remember last year, boys, like, this is where we raise our game. We don't just play not to lose. We're actually playing to
win.
And we were just solid back there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but the whole team was solid, but it was like, that only came because of that previous season of being soft,
Sure.
you know, and
Sure.
I think that they're all metaphors, because I think what shows up in the game of sports shows up in the game of life a lot.
For sure.
It's
And
just,
we give ourselves a lot of excuses to not fail or succeed.
yeah,
A lot of times we as just society will, well, I didn't succeed because of this.
right.
The thing is that I know from competing at a high level and from growing up really quickly as a young boy,
Yeah.
is that if you don't understand how to compartmentalize the ego from all of that stuff,
Mhm.
you will consistently give yourself excuses of why you're not going to succeed.
Mhm.
It's not even about the failing, it's the success, because success is scary.
Right.
It really is.
Yeah.
People say, hey, I want to be super successful, but when you're leading from the top, when
Yeah.
you're leading, you're the tip of the spear. You feel everything.
Yeah.
And so I speak from experience there. I own my own gym. I own my own business.
Yeah.
I am the head coach at Factory X.
Mhm.
Everything that goes through that place, I feel, see, and do.
The buck stops with you.
The failure, the
For sure.
success, all that stuff. That's not an easy task, because that part of it is success. You look from the window in
Mhm.
and you see, and I'm not saying we're not successful, we are, but the point is that the daily struggle there can break you if you don't mentally put yourself in a position to say, okay,
Right.
I'm not afraid to succeed, but I'm also not afraid to fail. And if I fail, I'm going to learn.
Mhm.
And if I learn, I can continue to grow and succeed and not stay on a plateau.
Right.
And that's the ticket to get there. Now, how do you get there?
Mhm.
From my opinion, it's fail a lot,
Mhm.
right? Fail. Stop being so afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, every practice I tell my guys, take chances on the mat today. Fail a lot today. Let's take chances. Let's get after it. Let's not stay on a plateau and just coast today.
Yeah.
And if you failed, be slightly delusional. You're still the baddest motherfucker on the planet,
Mhm.
and get after it again, and just wipe it out of your memory. Right?
Mhm.
You have to have a short memory in life. You have to have a short memory in sports.
Yeah.
You have to have a short memory in relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're not perfect people. We're
Right.
not. There's only one perfect person. That's not us.
Right.
So, that's the short memory thing is a big deal.
Right.
I've had a kid, sit there in a sparring round. You got a 5-minute round, and in the first 90 seconds, he gets choked out, for example, and he's got 3 minutes and 30 seconds left of a round. The first thing I tell him is, hey, refocus, breathe, short memory, clear it. It didn't even happen. Let's go.
Yeah.
Restart the entire round.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do, but that's how you become an expert, and that's
Right.
how you become great.
Right.
And you have to do the same thing in life. You have to do the same thing in business, relationships. Those are things that are super important. It's a super important skill to learn.
Mhm.
And I always say you have to be slightly delusional. can't be so delusional that it's ridiculous.
Right.
But you have to be slightly delusional to be great.
Right.
Because especially when you get into the media's eye, or you're a figure where people know you, people don't want to see you succeed as you're coming up.
Right.
When you get to the top, though, they build you up to break you down. That's
Right.
just the way life is.
Right.
Think about any dynasty in sports.
Sure.
Think about any perfect couple that
Yep.
you've thought about,
Yep.
any amazing church.
Yep.
You start getting there, and then people start hating.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how we are as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And characters revealed then.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, is what's inside the character of that culture.
Right. Something I've noticed in my coaching over the last decade of people too is that there will be that initial, for instance, if you were taking someone to start mixed martial arts, or just taking a little kid and teaching them to play baseball or ride a bike, like that initial exponential growth curve of picking up something is super fast at the beginning, right?
So fast.
But then, like with all my clients, there's that initial bump of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. And then at some point you get into the middle part of your marathon when you're like you said, it's like the blue belt where you're like, I've accomplished that. Oh shit,
that
like
mountain's
that.
tall.
I'm not even close to being done, and I'm already spent, And then that's where I've seen a lot of, call it justification, rationalization of like, well, I've done pretty good, so so far, so I can eat this cupcake for now. Plus, I'll get back to it tomorrow. It's like, I deserve this, or it's just that willingness to accept a lowering of a standard, And do you see that too in terms of, maybe not with the guys that you're dealing with, but just in terms of life in general? It's like we get that initial bump because we're excited, and we can pick up something pretty fast. But once we get into the groove of like, well, this is where the work really begins, you start to see people, like you said, kind of bailing out because it's not glorious, and the like the leveling up is probably smaller increments versus this huge,
Sure.
right? So I feel like when you get into like professional sports, you're looking at Tiger's swing or a baseball player's, and all he's doing is turning his hands like this tiniest
Makes a
of
huge
little
difference.
tweak, right? But you clearly must have done this for so long, because I was reading some of the articles online about you too, that you can see the little bad habits, where like the tricks the guys are trying to run, or like the shortcuts they're trying to skip, which is ultimately going to catch up with them years down the road.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
Probably both in mechanics, but also mentality.
For
right.
Sure.
How do you actually keep them from, how do you, again, mentor them towards, that's not going to serve you in the long run, if that makes sense, in terms of where they might be cutting corners, whether it be training, nutrition, lifestyle, taxes.
You're right. Exactly.
Whatever they're cheating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's funny is I, like you'd mentioned, I deal with pro athletes daily.
Yeah.
They're no different. The exponential curve of growth at the beginning is so high.
Yeah.
And they're just, they're bonkers about what they're doing, and it's can't wait to get back on the mat. Yeah. You get 5, 6 years in, 7, 8, 10 years in.
Yeah.
And what happens is whether you're at the blue belt level, like you're talking about, like some of your clients, or I'm talking about with some of my athletes, or you're at a black belt level, a couple things have to happen. One, you have to be in love with the process.
Right.
It's simple to say, right? It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah. People understand it, again, intellectually, but like, what does that look like?
Yeah. What's the process, right? And there's a book, it's called It Takes What It Takes by Trevor Moawad. He works with a lot of high-level athletes, a lot of NFL players. He talks about it's called neutral thinking. Like, you've heard about, hey, the positive thinking and to the negative thinking.
Yep.
That's one view of how to do this. Trevor's view is, let's be neutral. So let's not think about yesterday or tomorrow. Let's be present in the moment today. Let's just neutral think today, right? And so you have to be in love with the process. That's the thing is I think sometimes people's motivation is not the process.
Right.
It's the money, or it's the status, or it's the position, or it's the UFC on your gloves.
Yeah.
It's not the process of getting there, because
It's
ultimately,
extrinsic.
yeah, because where do you spend all your time? You spend all your time on this.
Right.
Not just in mixed martial arts, but in business.
Yeah.
All your time is spent in the practice of your business.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to a big presentation, which let's just say is weekly or
Right.
10 times a year or whatever it is,
Right.
that's not the daily process.
Right.
The daily process is everything that you have to keep sharp, and all the things that are your weaknesses, you got to learn to sharpen. And so that is the process. Do you love that piece of it? Because if you love that piece of it, the fighting part is the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
The big meeting, that's the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
The preparation is how the big meeting happened.
Right.
The preparation is how the big fight happened in the cage, right?
Yeah.
The preparation of relationships. I was just talking to one of my fighters the other day, and he's a young kid. He's 23. His girlfriend broke up with him.
Yeah.
It's devastating. He thought I was going to be with her. I get it. I've been there before.
Totally.
The thing I told him is, look, dating is dating for a reason. It's called dating because you're dating someone to learn process. You're dating someone to figure out what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
You're dating someone to hone in on your skills as a man. I was talking to one of my male fighters, right? So as a man, you're honing into those. You're learning all this stuff as you date.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next time you go and you meet this next beautiful woman, right?
Yeah.
If your funnel is this big, you're starting to funnel who you are, but you're also funneling into this shorter gap of what you're after. You're not okay with all this stuff.
Right.
And so the process of all that stuff is key, right? And you got to be, even as hurtful as it is right this second for the kid I was talking to with his heart broken, you got to be in love with the process, knowing that this is not what God intended for you, even though you thought you had this plan.
Mm-hmm.
What God intended for you, you obviously can't see yet, but he's letting you go through the process to then eventually get to that next best person, right? Or maybe that next person becomes your wife of 50 years,
right?
And you have, multiple kids or whatever you decide. But
Right.
the one of the biggest things that I notice is they fall out of love with the process,
Mm-hmm.
and then they start to shortcut the process,
Mm-hmm.
and it works for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like building a foundation in a home where you did a really good job on the foundation, but 15% of it you just did okay.
Yeah.
And then you're wondering why the right wing of your home is starting to crumble a little.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because you just didn't solidify the foundation, and the process is that, and you everything is always won when you go back to the foundation, or what I call the basics.
Mm-hmm.
The basics is key. Yeah.
Right.
The fundamentals is key. So I think that's a part of it. And I think and I know that's the hardest part. And the hardest part about it is that never stops.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people get overwhelmed with that because they think
you should be able to check it off.
Yeah. Well, I think they think a week ahead, a year ahead, 6 years ahead.
Yeah.
What's it going to look like? What am I? No, man, it's not up to you to figure out about tomorrow. Yes, you have to plan and you have to do these things for your business and your marriage and your kids. I get it. But when we're talking foundationally speaking, it's today.
Right.
What are we doing today?
Right.
Let's focus on that.
Right.
Yes. In a month's time, you have a goal. Great. In a year's time, you have a goal. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's plan for that.
Yeah.
But the daily process is the only way we're getting there.
Right.
And if you're not present, what's the point?
Right.
So that's my feeling when it comes to some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's the foundation.
Yeah.
Always is, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think about that in terms of the work I'm doing always on myself, the work I'm doing with men here in the community and, around the world and all that good stuff is like, it still comes back down to your code of conduct, like, who are you committed to being, because, the environment, the circumstances, the shit's going to change around you. The storm's going to come and go, but like, are you solid,
Mm-hmm.
or are you going to shift when, temptation comes your way, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing, so.
And you've probably heard the analogy about the what cattle and what bison do when the
Yeah.
storm comes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We I talk a lot about that. That's actually one of our mantras at Factory X is we have an acronym of fear is, and it means forging elite is running into storms,
Mhm.
right? And so, I mean, we went as far as making a coin that we give the guys, and you can see
How cool is that?
there's a buffalo on there,
Mm.
and you know it just reminds, and we're all part of a group, and it reminds them of what who they are, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
really cool.
you know, the thing about it is, if you haven't heard that story before, and this is not just a story, biologists have gone out there and
Yeah.
seen this happen,
Yeah.
where you know the storm comes over the west and the cattle run from it,
Mhm.
thinking they can outrun it, and the bison do the exact opposite, and they run into it knowing that's going to pass them over.
Mhm.
And yeah, that sounds cute when you tell the story, but every single one of us have been in storms before, and and you just decide, what are you going to do here?
Mhm.
You're going to go drink, you're going to go, you know, get fucked up, you're going to go uh do do ridiculous stuff because the storm's
Mhm.
over you,
Mhm.
or are you gonna buckle down and you know, run into that thing and know that it's going to be gone?
Mhm.
Like you said earlier, you know, it's darkest before it's light. And
Yeah.
so it's the same analogy, but it doesn't matter which one you use.
Right.
The point is, it's inevitable that the storms are going to come in life.
Yes.
It's just fact.
Yes.
And so, have you equipped yourself mentally and physically to do that?
Right.
And I think a lot of times we are pussies when it comes to running in the storm,
Mhm.
and we're pussies when someone says something hurtful about us, or about your business, or your process,
Right.
or
Right.
you know, we get hurt feelings about that.
Right.
And so then we decide, well, you know, we listen to one or two people when 98 are telling you're doing a great job,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And so I deal with this a lot. I mean, I'm not I'm not on the public forum like a lot of pro athletes, but I'm on the public forum as a coach,
Yep.
and I understand that. And you're never as great as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. You're
Mhm.
somewhere in the middle.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, it's just stop listening to the 2% of people saying you suck.
Mhm.
98% of people saying you're great.
Mhm.
So why don't you listen to them, right?
Mhm.
And so, but we just become pussies because it hurts. It's like,
Right.
oh man, you hurt my feelings. And believe me, I've had my feelings hurt a lot,
Mhm.
especially when you're at the tip of the spear like me, where I'm responsible for a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
People say some hurtful shit, and who cares?
Mhm.
Social media and these people that are saying this shit, or if you're not on a public forum, the people that are out there saying that about you, they're not your friends anyway.
Mhm.
So why do we give a shit?
Right.
You know, and we do because it's human nature.
Right.
We want everyone to like you,
Right.
right?
Right.
But you know, breaking news, not everyone's going to like you,
Right.
and so you just have to accept that, and
Right.
that's why I think it's important that you have your fundamental process and your fundamental core beliefs intact. And if you're not organizing that in your head and your heart, if these two things don't intersect with that,
Mhm.
and they're always bypassing each other, then you get off path, you get off target, and you find yourself wandering around life
Yeah.
and being
Exactly.
miserable,
Exactly.
and then wondering what the hell happened 5 years later when your business is gone and your wife left you, or your
Mhm.
kids hate you, or
Mhm.
whatever, you know.
Mhm.
And so I'm not perfect by all means, but the point is that you got to figure out a process,
Right. Right.
because shit's coming.
Right.
It's just going to.
Yeah. You better be prepared.
Yeah, it's
Otherwise,
coming.
you're going to be caught in the lurch. And I think it goes back to, like you said, it's neither better than it is the person it is, and that's why I think it supports that whole neutrality of thought.
Hmm.
In some sense, where you're like, and I think it's just divorcing yourself from the ego.
Hmm.
And I was raised Christian, and the way that I was raised was like, there's two forms of ego. There's little ego that we assign to ourselves,
Sure.
and then there's capital ego, which is God, right?
Sure.
And to not pay attention to that little ego, because it's gonna do you wrong. If you
Sure.
think that you're hot shit one day and then you're not the next, I see it as a lot of times people listen to the 2% that's nagging at them because they have a bad habit of speaking to themselves that way internally all the time. So that voice is loudest, and then it connects with them, and it only supports this nagging, or defeated type conversation that goes in our heads. And I think that's where you need to, anyone that's listening to this, is to work towards is that neutral mentality, letting go of the highs or the lows in terms of what drives you, but finding that greater purpose, because if it is everything that's driven by the outside, the external, like you see on your gloves or whatever, it's like, hate to say it, but we all going to retire. Everyone's careers in that sense is going to, like, at some point you're going to be at the top, and at some point you're going to be washed up, let's say. But I do feel like you're absolutely right. If you fall in love with the process, man, like, that's the difference between those couples that have been married for 50 years and they're still deeply in love with each other because they've just enjoyed every day.
Yes.
It's not the date nights or the amazing vacations that are romantic. It's like the boring and mundane 3 months when you're stuck in your house for coronavirus, and you're still having fun little moments, and making little things fun. And I think that's been, a lot of what you say kind of resonates for me too, because I feel like that's a big part of why I'm still single looking, because it's like my funnel. And of course everyone critiques me like, oh, your standards are too high, or you're too picky. I'm like, no, like, it's a smaller funnel. I know what I want. 15 years ago I didn't know what I wanted.
Agree.
Right.
Agree.
And I'm also looking for someone who loves that process, who's going to stay in the fire no matter what, and will actually enjoy the good and the not so good, because it's part of the failing towards becoming better together as a partnership. I think that's a little bit harder to find, or I found it as hard to find.
Well, I think settling is one of the reasons why we're unhappy.
Yeah.
Whether it's with a job or a spouse, health.
Yeah.
You go to the doctor, or you go to a nutritionist, or you go to a gym, and you say, hey, I'm here for your help. And then they help you.
Yeah.
And then you revert back.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that just didn't work. I'm going to do this other thing.
Yeah.
It's not the gym. It's not the doctor. It's not the spouse. I mean, you got to go look in the mirror, because if you'll follow the steps, the roadmap's there to help you be successful. The point is, if I told you how to get from here to Wyoming, and you took 8 different diversions off that map that I showed you, you might get there, but it's going to take you longer.
Yeah.
So why not just follow the map that they're showing you,
right.
and then create your journey amongst it.
Right.
And that happens a lot. And so I mean, I'm all for not settling. Why are you going to settle?
Yeah.
Well, but you have to look at, are you taking past issues and making current partner pay for past issues that they have no responsibility in?
Right.
So there's always that fine line between having high standards, but then are you making them pay for what you got hurt for in the past?
Right. Unrealistic standards.
Yeah, because now they're unrealistic, and you're like, and so they've got to be in a neutral ground, but meet the standards that you want. Whether that's your spouse, or your someone you're dating, or your job, or you know what I mean. So and I feel like if you can be in that pattern and have that neutral thinking, to where you're like, hey, I'm not going to make this person pay for my ex of what they did.
Right.
I'm going to allow them to be them, but I have my standards, and my standards are X, and you meet that, then I think success potentially can happen there, because you've given it the ability to grow.
Right.
If you don't, it's just stifled, and you're like, you're never going to meet my standards, but you never even let them grow.
Right.
And so, that's something, knowing from just my past, is that those are mistakes I've made in the past, for sure. And I've been with my wife for 22 years. We have two amazing kids. My wife has been on this journey with me in mixed martial arts since the beginning. And people ask me sometimes, hey coach, why have you guys been together so long? How have you been together so long? And I always say, the thing I always come back to is, it's not that you're going to be in the same lane on the road for 22 years, because you're not.
Right.
It's that you stay on the same road.
Right.
Sometimes I'm going to be over in the left lane, she's going to be in the right lane.
Yeah.
But when it goes to the left, the road goes to the left, we don't fork off.
Right.
We at least stay inside on the road.
Right.
And yes, you want to be in the same lane with each other more than not. But you have to stay on the same road, and you have to and people are going to change.
Right.
People say all the time, well, people don't change. You're right, kind of. But people grow. People's expectations grow. People's expectations diminish.
Yeah.
Those things, that's the road. Like, that is the road.
Progress versus growth.
Correct.
Or I should say, growth versus not changing. And I think that you're absolutely right. I think it's the values is what dictates where you're going.
Yes.
I feel like that's what I'm always looking for. I'm like, I know I'm gonna fall in love with someone who we have the same values, shared values, because that means we're going towards the same destination.
Especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
Core values are huge.
Right. But then it's the differences that's going to create the chemistry.
For sure.
Otherwise I'd marry myself.
Yeah, you'd marry yourself. That's boring as hell.
Yeah. So I want to avoid that. But I do feel like a big part of that is just absolutely having those conversations so that you know what you're getting yourself into.
And ask hard questions. I mean, if you're getting serious with somebody, ask some tough questions. How do you want to raise your kids in faith? How would you raise your kids? How do you think you would raise your kids? Those kind of things that's a big deal.
Yeah.
What your vision of raising a kid is versus what your faith vision is versus theirs.
Yep.
If you have a lot of faith and they're totally against it,
right, and
you're trying to change them into your view, it probably is going. It might be okay for a little bit, but it's probably going to end badly.
Right.
And same with core values of how you're gonna. If you're not on the same page with kids, that's a huge deal. If you don't have to be the same, but you at least have to have the similar core value of this is how I envision doing this. And as you become a parent, you realize that your instinct takes over, and you're like, oh shit, it is all about core value. And so that's got to be in sync.
Right.
That just because you like Italy and she likes Germany, you can get through that.
Yeah.
Go to both places.
Yeah.
But in big stuff that means a lot to you or to anyone listening or me, you better at least be on the same road.
Right. Which makes me think of probably what you've built with your gym, which is probably very reflective of what you built with your relationship and what you built internally in your own mindset, which is like your values kind of dictates your culture. And you have probably a culture at your gym. You also probably have a culture, a family culture. Like I think about these things, and then in my own dating, when I'm, that's important for me too. And I have these conversations, and I've gotten far down that road with several women over the years. When we connect on this is how we foresee kids, or this is how we foresee, being on that same highway together, and where it's kind of fun to dream, about those type of things. But if you don't have the same mindset in some regards, just in terms of even having an open, growth-minded mindset, I think is so important.
It's huge.
Otherwise, for me, just being that is one of my top core values, then it's hard to not question whether or not someone's going to have your back while you continue to grow. If they're scared of, the uncertainty of growth.
Yep.
When I'm kind of thinking to myself, it's just like sports. Like how do you grow unless you fail?
Yep.
And we're going to have to fail, whether it be in business or relationship or health. Like, and I think those are all things that a lot of people probably don't think about, that I didn't think about earlier in my life.
Yeah.
But that are the differentiators between success or not. Right. So.
And it's funny as you thought that, it makes me think of my dad, because my dad, obviously I said, he was young when he had me. My parents always had a really turbulent relationship.
Yeah.
Of course, got divorced in time. My dad was with many women and never really happy with any of them. Was consistently bouncing back and forth and living with different women, and or they live with him, and you could just tell that he was just trying to fill a void, you know. And the most growth I ever saw my dad have is when he just said, "Listen, I'm gonna buy my own place. I'm gonna live in my own place by myself, and I'm gonna grow as me right now." You know, I don't think he consciously made all those decisions at that point. Maybe he did. I'd have to ask him. But the point is that he went and lived by himself and reconnected with himself. And whatever the time period of that is for anyone is different. But for my dad, for example, it was years. You know, where he wasn't really dating anyone. If he was, it was super casual, and he was just doing him. And that time period is such a crazy growth time period because there's a lot of reflection there where you get to know who you are, and you get to find some peace, and you're not putting your joy on someone else.
Totally.
Like, well, that person's going to bring me the joy that I'm missing.
Right.
And instead, like, you can't give anyone joy unless you have the internal joy first.
Right.
And I feel like he was missing that for a long, 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 long time. And it's funny because he knew this lady at work. She was one of his vendors that worked with him and would come in and out, you know, and he would employ her company to work for them. He knew her for 15 years. And it's funny because you always hear this stuff like serendipity or timing is everything.
Totally.
You could find the right person, but the timing's wrong.
Totally.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, my dad knew this lady for 15 years. And in the interim of, you know, still having that professional relationship with her, he was growing over here in himself,
Yeah.
where he'd never done this before since he was 17 years old, just focused on himself,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so he does this for years. He then chemistry happens with this lady that he had been employing or what have you, and now they're together, and they've been together, you know, for a couple years now, and they live together, and they're thriving because. And I don't know what her journey was like on the other side. I know that she had been single for a little bit too, but the thing about it is, if they both were in similar positions in growth, and then the timing was right, and they didn't compromise core value.
Yep.
And you know, my not that old, but in the sense of life, but you know, he's in his early 60s.
Yeah.
And so, did he think in his head at 17 that it was going to take him till he was in his early 60s to find that joy and then find someone? No, he didn't know the time period.
Yeah.
The cool part about that story, though, is that it happened, and he's not in control of the time period. Right. He's not. He's in control of today, and he's in control of his growth. He wasn't growing when he was with all those women and trying to fill these crazy voids with just having someone in his life. He wasn't. And he just changed as a person once that happened, and for the better. And now when he's with his current wife, my dad's a completely different dude than I knew. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's cool to see.
Yeah,
and
cool.
So, but timing is not our job.
Right.
It's God's job.
Right.
Our job is to enjoy the process even when it's stormy outside.
Totally.
And not that you're going to be like, oh, this is great, but don't run from that shit.
Right.
Go grow. Go grow.
Right.
Even though it's hard.
Right.
I mean, I guarantee sitting in quarantine by yourself, you know, because I can't speak on that. I have a family.
Yeah.
Right. But I guarantee sitting in quarantine by yourself, there's some reflection moments probably where you're like, what in the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And it would be really nice to call up what's, even though I know
Yeah.
she's not the exact fit, but it would cure some of the loneliness or,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
And so, again, I can only assume, I can't speak for you because I'm not you, but I'm sure that you've had that in your life with you obviously being single now and having some of those learning lessons in marriage and life and all those things. So I'm sure that's probably helpful for you to talk on that, because I guarantee some of your viewers are in your spot.
Yeah, that's a battle for sure. Yeah, that's absolutely a battle. Because I think it is, and that whether it shows up in relationships or business or just lifestyle habits, which is like, hey, I'm lonely right now, or I'm stressed right now. I'm going to eat something that's not all that healthy,
Sure.
in the short term. So it's instant gratification for longer term, ill effects on your health,
Yeah.
physical health, mental health,
Yes.
relational health.
Yes.
I've had certain areas of my life where I'm dialed in and other areas where I'm just not as disciplined,
Sure.
and I think that comes back to, again, a variety of things, but not being clear on the vision, maybe as clear as I'd like to be in certain areas of my life. Um, just limiting beliefs that probably I have set up for like my sense of identity, or where I shame myself. So I feel like, oh, I'm weak in these areas, and I think that probably shows up, like you said, whether you're a world champion or you're,
Yeah.
Joe Schmo,
Oh yeah.
we all have, that's the funny thing, is that human behavior is we're all so much more alike than we are different,
Sure.
in terms of how we deal with stress, or when we have successes in our life. And there's one thing that I think of when you say that too is I was watching an interview with Oprah and Jay-Z a long time ago. Yeah, and she asked him the great question, which is like, what's the one question you have yet to answer in your life?
She asked him that.
Yeah, yeah. And I loved his answer. His answer was like, he didn't really even have to think about it. He's like, I have yet to figure out where the growth is in success. He's like, I am who I am today because of all my failings, and thankfully that's what he attributes all his success to. And just really got me like, because it's like, Tony Robbins says it, like, when people, what does he say? When people succeed, they tend to party, and when people lose, they tend to ponder, and in the losing, if you will, the pondering is where a lot of the growth comes, and I think, yeah, being single and COVID, hanging out by myself, at home, it does
some pondering.
Yeah, there's always pondering, maybe too much pondering on my part.
Need to go fishing more.
Yeah, right? Paralysis by analysis. Yeah. But that's all. Again, this the idea, to your earlier point. It's not to shame myself, or for any of us listening, to shame ourselves for, oh gosh, I should be married by now. I should have children. I should be, making X
I always say,
amount of
like,
dollars,
says who?
Yeah, right.
Who's saying this?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
it's our ego, I think.
I know. Like, who's saying what? What do you mean you should be married?
Yeah.
Based on who?
Yeah.
Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
And I know people be like, well, it's easy for you to say. You've been with your wife for 22 years. You don't understand you don't understand it. But I was single once too.
Yeah.
And so I never got married because I felt that pressure of getting married. I got married because I was like, I'm not settling here. Yeah. This woman for me is the woman of a lifetime. I've outpunted my coverage here, so you better grab on,
Right.
And so, but the point is like, who says all this shit that we talk about? Like, what are you talking about when you have these expectations? Where are you getting your information?
Right.
Because just because my journey is with my wife for 22 years to present day doesn't mean that yours is wrong. If you're single right now and you're just trying to navigate life and figure out what's right for you,
right.
We're not right or wrong.
Right.
who says that that's a success? Right. If I have that internal joy for myself and for my family, for my decisions, that's success. That's not happiness, because happiness and joy are such two different things. Happiness, you tell me a joke, I laugh, it's funny, and then it flees and it's gone. Joy is that internal joy where, you wake up and you're fired up.
Right.
Today, let's get after today.
Right.
I'm fired up about what I'm doing, what my relationships are, my vision. And that's the thing is, people. That's why I hate New Year's resolution stuff.
Yeah.
I hate that shit.
Same.
I hate it.
Same.
Because, and I've done it before where I've been like, I'm going to do this, and then I do, and it doesn't last, and then and then it just fades.
Right.
One of the things I've done with my team is, and I learned this actually from John Gordon. He's written several books. Energy Bus is one of his books. I'm a big reader, so, and I don't read just motivational stuff, but this book is one of those. Anyway, he has a thing that he does, and they pick a word. He picks a word for the year. Whatever your word is, that's what you're standing by. My word, for example, for 2020, it's funny, especially with all the nonsense that's gone on in 2020. My word is buffalo, because of the story. If we go back to running into the storm, right? So essentially, buffalo to me means run into the storm. But I have my team pick the words, and these guys pick their word, and then they go. We have these big pillars in the gym that obviously hold the structural foundation of the building up, and we have to cover them with big pads, so they don't run into the pole, right? So, but on those, we've taken a Sharpie and written down our words. So if you go over to the motivation pole or whatever the hell you want to call it, you can see that, hey, what's persistence? That's a word on there. What is pace? What does that mean? What does buffalo mean? Like, those are things, and you can go ask people, and then people can say to you, this is what it means to me. And instead of a resolution, I found that carrying out that internal word has helped a lot, because when you're being a bitch and you're like, oh man, I want to run from the storm, I got to be like, buffalo, bro. It's time to run into that thing, right? And so for me, instead of doing like a New Year's resolution, we've picked a word, and again, I learned that from John Gordon. But that's something that has helped me a lot. I'd encourage you or anybody that's listening or watching to try that. Try that for a year. Go pick a word and try it for a year. Or pick a couple. I don't know, but we pick one, and we stick to that one, and then every year we change it.
Love that.
Yeah. So it's pretty, but that stuff can be powerful.
Right. Which is, again, you could call it a standard that you're focusing on versus an expectation. I mean, you said it earlier, which is like, who says you have to be married by now? That's an expectation that we kind of arbitrarily set, in the same sense that the difference between, that as it shows up, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, in your gym would be you standing outside of the cage watching one of your fighters grapple and being like, no, you should have done this right there. Like, what? Why should I? Like, no, I expect you to do these moves when these happen, as if you're attempting to micromanage something that's not even within your control, versus saying, this is the standard that this gym's culture, is founded upon, which is just excellence. Give me 100% commitment. You're killing a ton, but that's because a lot of times people are after and asking me, what's the difference? Because I'm like, change, I've heard this too, exchange your expectation for appreciation, and it'll change your life. And just focus on total appreciation, which is what I do now. I'm like, would I like to have things be different in my life? Perhaps, and yet I'm loving life where it is right now too. And I also know that when I'm married and I have kids and they're all running around and, spray painting the walls and shit like that, I'm like, oh, remember that time when it was just me and I didn't have to ask?
It was so much easier.
I could go to bed when I wanted to go to bed and sleep in when I wanted to sleep in. Like, I know there's going to be those times.
Yeah, there's a give and take.
Yeah. So, let go of the expectations and rather set that high expectation. I'm sorry, set that high standard of giving it your all. Right. Which goes to Michael Jordan, everything that we're talking about. There's obviously tons of themes that are kind of,
it should feel scary, by the way.
Yeah. Right.
If it's high, that should feel scary, where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to achieve all this.
Right.
And whether you believe in God or not, I do. So that's going to take divine intervention on my end. When I look at my vision, I'm not going to be able to do it all alone.
Right.
I'm going to need some help.
Right.
And I'm like, baby Jesus, please help me here. You know what I mean?
Infant baby Jesus.
Right. Exactly. So, but I'm being funny there. But the point is you're not going to be able to do it all on your own, by the way. Yeah. And whether you have a faith base or not, I can only speak about me. My faith base is I'm going to have to lean on God to help me get through some of this, which is really hard to do, because submitting for me is really tough that way. right? Submitting on the mat is tough too,
Right.
right? But you've learned to tap though.
Right. Right.
Sometimes in life, I'm like, all right, man, you tell me, lean on you. The word, the Bible, as I read it daily, says submit. Let him guide you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's really tough, man. I got this. And then there's days when I just get broke, and I'm like, all right, I'm submitting.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
don't know
all
what else to
right.
do.
Help me.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
whatever you're saying to your faith. Again, you don't have to have the same as mine, but that's what I do. And sometimes you just gotta submit to that and be present and be like, all right, the timeline is not of our control,
Right.
and that's hard to deal with.
Super hard.
It
Yep.
is, because
Yep.
we're very impatient when it comes to that stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Me included.
Yep.
And but your dreams have to be so big that it's going to take some of that.
Right.
They have to scare you, you know, and they have to be big. And your standards have to be high.
Right.
And it's just not the right time yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're like, yeah, I know, but you know, fuck off. You're going home to a wife and 2 kids,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I get it, but it's just not your time yet.
Right.
Or, yeah, I want to be a world champion. I get it, but you're a blue belt.
Yeah.
We need to get to expert level to compete, and then go become a world champion. That takes time. You know, you're willing to put the work in to get there, even though it's not going to be exactly on your timeline.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I struggle with. It's not like I got that all figured out.
Yeah.
But through a lot of failure and a lot of time,
Yeah.
it becomes more clear. And when I submit and let go of the reins a little bit, and I don't mean that like God's going to take care of everything. I hate when I hear that, even though that's probably true. Okay. You're still going to have to put in the heart.
Right.
But you're going to have to lean on someone too. And for me, you know, for my process, for my vision, I have to submit sometimes. And I don't submit enough.
Right.
I'm not great at that. That's something I struggle with a lot too, is submitting on that end and being like, all right, man, because I'm a type A guy. I don't like, I'll just drive forward and get it done. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work.
I would think, at least what I've seen from my family members, my friends, all those that have kids, that's probably one of the biggest areas of submitting or surrendering that you're required to do in this human experience, which is like, you love something so much in, you know, the faces of your children, and yet there's going to be plenty of times as they get old and older, they'd be like, you're going out, be home by 1 a.m. or be home by 11 p.m. Like, God, I trust that they're going to come home safe. Like that, and just letting kids fail so that they learn. Otherwise, you're only enabling, you know, you're prolonging their growth.
Right.
You know,
right? Exactly.
They're going to be a 35-year-old living in the basement,
living in the basement, and mommy making you lunch.
Right.
You know,
right.
every day.
Right.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's funny because my daughter, she's 16, so she's driving. She's had her license for, I don't know, 7-8 months, something like that.
Yeah.
She's hit 2 cars, nothing major.
Right.
Like all in the parking lot where she's backed out and bumped the bumper. But I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But when I think back at it, I'm like, yeah, you got to bump some bumpers to learn how to drive. Right.
Absolutely.
You got to bump some bumpers to learn how to drive. And that's why I didn't go buy you. I mean, she got a nice car, but I didn't go buy her a nice car, right? Because you're going to bump some bumpers. For sure. And if she doesn't learn how to do that stuff, she doesn't learn how to navigate and drive like on the highway, right? And so it all goes back to it's all from the stem of what we're talking about. Totally. And that's a foundational piece. But to get a strong foundation, you got to be willing to go put a lot of work in. You got to be willing to have self-exploration and growth. And that's tough because that's not easy. No, that's not easy.
And what is the key to that? My thought goes to, like, to have that drive, it has to come from a greater sense of purpose. Like, it has to come from inside here versus, like we talk about, all out there, right? You got to figure out your why. As you're just going through you're going to burn out at some point if that's where it's coming from. You know, whether it be your foundation in God or whatever the case might be, but I feel like it has to be something greater than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you're just looking out for your own needs, to be a world champion or
Mm-hmm.
to be with that significant other, or like you're ultimately going to get what you want and then be like, is this all there is?
Yeah.
So I do feel like it still falls back to having that purpose of just showing up and enjoying that process of, or falling in love with who you're becoming, right? Because there's going to be the highs and lows, the trophies and the losses all along those journey, using that as a metaphor for all of our lives. And yet, if you're not really in love with that process of hitting the mat every single day,
Mm-hmm.
in dating your wife or your husband or your significant other, and like when it's boring or, then it's going to lose its juice and you're going to start to question, like, why am I even showing up at the gym?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we even doing this relationship? Why am I even taking this risk in this business that I own? If you're not really clear with why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You think that's true?
Yeah, no, I do. There's a rapper named Russ. He says, trust the what, fuck the when, know the why. Right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty profound if
Yeah.
you think about that.
I like that.
He says, trust the what, fuck the when, know the why.
Mm-hmm.
And so the what and the why are what matter.
Mm-hmm.
The when we put way too much weight in,
Mm-hmm.
me included.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take the middle piece and you look at the what and the why,
Yeah.
that then is going to shape where you're headed.
Mm.
And so the when is what stops us. Well, how come I haven't gotten the promotion?
Yeah.
I've been working my ass
Like,
off.
come
I did
on.
it. I
Come
did
on
it for
already.
2 years now.
Yeah. Right.
Well, maybe it's going to take 5.
Mm-hmm.
Or how come I'm not a world champion yet? I've been at this for 10 years. How come I haven't found the right girl yet? I've been single for 3.
Mm.
Right? So the when is the issue. But the when is nothing if you don't know the what and the why. So
Right.
again, it goes back to, I always say this to my fighters, you have to have a system, organized system on paper.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand how to drill your organized system for your strengths
Mm-hmm.
and where we need to sharpen up.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have an organization of your system. And if you put it on paper or whiteboard on your phone, however you learn, we have to be able to have an organization. And let's just say the organization of your system is A to Z. When you're on F, you should be able to come back to A, and you should be able to jump from A to Z and Z back to M, and that should recycle.
Mm-hmm.
So your system should recycle, right? And
Right.
so if you have a system in place and you can recycle your system, it takes organization though to build it. And if we do that, then we start to learn what the what and the why is.
Mm-hmm.
And the when doesn't matter because we're consumed with organization of our game.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's time to go compete, so if you and I we're going to spar live right now, we got to shut this off now. Turn off the brain.
Yeah.
It's not time to think anymore.
Yeah.
Don't think.
Right.
It's time to just work on instinct.
Right.
And so I think too often in life we don't trust our instincts. Our instincts say X, but then we're like, and then we get emotions involved.
Totally.
Whereas if you would just trust instinct is right. And so trust the instinct.
Yeah.
But you've got to have the process, the organization of your process, and you've got to have, or your vision, however you want to call that. You've got to have, and you've got to be able to recycle back and forth, even though it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, and it's not going in consecutive order like you want it.
Yeah.
You have to be able to understand that A to Z means this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go Z to M. Sometimes I got to go all the way back to the beginning to restart and recycle my process.
Right.
And I think that's one of the keys to life is that you've got to, if you have a vision, what is it? And then in the vision, what's the process to get there?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the what.
Yep.
And then why do you want to do all of this?
Mm-hmm.
What's your purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the purpose of the why? Why?
Why?
Right. And so answer that to yourself. What's the purpose of the why?
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, these two things, the what and the why, consume you so much that the when is like, oh shit, it happened.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're not going to think and be like, damn, wish this would happen. No, you are.
Yeah.
But don't be consumed with the when. Right. Go back to your process and recycle and do the things and evolve and grow your system and tweak your system, but have a base foundation of system. Right. And so, and then when it's time to compete, date, get married, fight in the cage, play a football game. When it's time to compete, trust your instincts and then shut this off and go. Let's go. Stop. Don't think. Stop thinking. Right. It's because we just now you're overanalyzing everything because we're processing. Well, yes, there's times to process. That's when we drill, like in fighting. It's when we drill and we coach and we drill and then we flow it together and you're still kind of processing. And now I'm like, okay, go live. Turn this shit off.
Just go.
Go. Just go.
Like and trust your instincts.
Trust your instincts.
Your training and your
exactly. That's what I tell my fighters all the time before they fight. You wouldn't be here if you didn't earn the opportunity. You know how to fight. You wouldn't be here if you didn't earn the opportunity. You know how to fight. Go trust your instincts tonight. And have a blast. Because what's the point? I mean, otherwise, what's the point?
Exactly.
And it's that simple, right? Is go have a blast. Right. And go make a statement. I just had a kid that fought a couple weeks ago. His name is Brandon Royval. I've trained that kid since he was 16. He's 26 now. So for 10 years, I've been training him. He used to ride his bike to the gym. You know, little 16-year-old, skinny little 16-year-old. He just got the opportunity to take a short notice fight in the UFC for his UFC debut. He was the LFA champion, which is a regional promotion across the US. And he was the champion for them. So obviously he's a great fighter. But he was on the regional scene. So if you're comparing it to Major League Baseball, for example, he was in the AAA.
Minor league.
He was the champ of the AAA. And
it's his time to come up.
It was his time, you know. And so he got an opportunity. We took it on super short notice. His opportunity, by the way, was, oh, by the way, you get this really good opportunity, but you get to go fight number 11 in the world in your debut in the UFC. Okay. My kid was like, fuck yeah, let's go. You know, and I was like, hell yeah, you've been training for 10 years. You are the epitome of coming in daily and me having to kick you out of the gym. He's one of those kids. Like, dude, you're doing too much. Get the hell out of here. Right. That kid went in there and literally changed his life because he went in there. He finished the number 11 guy in the second round with a submission, what we call a arm triangle from top. But he finished him, and he was awarded a bonus on top of his show and win money, which allowed him to stop working full time and just focus solely on fighting his craft. And a story like that is, you're like, holy shit, that actually exists. Yeah, it exists. But for 10 years, and still today, the kid's just in there loving process. But for 10 years, he was never consumed by the win, ever. He's never been a kid. Of course he wanted to be in the UFC. I'm not saying he didn't talk about that. But he wasn't consumed by that.
When are we going to get there?
No.
Get there?
He would just work his ass off.
Just
trust it, work his ass. Then he got opportunity. But you got to be ready when opportunity knocks, because it
can come short.
It knocks on weird times when you're like, oh shit, am I ready? And he didn't have to think that. And that's why he just went in there and trusted his instincts, you know. And he was upset at himself after the fight. He was like, coach, I'm so much better than that. I didn't get to showcase who I really was. I know I got the finish. I know I beat number 11 in the world, but I'm so much, I'm better than that. And he was upset. And I love that drive in him. But I told him at that moment, I said, because I've been here before with fighters, I said, don't you dare take away from the joy that you've worked your whole life.
Enjoy this moment.
Enjoy this moment. Stop it. We'll go back to the gym and get better. This is not the time and place. Today, you earned this. Today, you worked 10 years to get there, and you never were consumed with win. An opportunity knocked, and you went and beat one of the best fighters in your division in the entire world. Not Colorado, not the U.S., in the entire world. But he had to be prepared for 10 years to even get that opportunity, and he had to succeed and fail through that. He wasn't undefeated, so he's failed in his journey here. And he went out and he capitalized, he changed his life, and he made a statement, literally changed his life in that. But he didn't do it in that week. He did it in that whole buildup. And, if you learn anything from a 16 to a 26-year-old kid, you learn that fuck the win.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
He's the epitome of that.
Yeah.
And he is a leader.
Yeah.
And he's leading.
Yeah.
He's showing the other individuals on the mat, whether they're already in the UFC or they're not yet, that if you'll do this, stuff will happen when opportunity knocks. You just need to be mentally, physically ready.
Your day will come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think that getting back to what you said, that's what it is. And from my view, that's what it is the what and the why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think we could probably finish on a better note for that. Cause I think anyone that's listening or watching here on the video is like, that's a lot of times I think what we're up against, is when is this going to change? Or when are we going to get our day? It's like, when is this going to show up? Or man, like when I do feel like, cause I've spent time in that headspace and you end up letting life pass you by.
Yeah.
Because you're actually not in the present moment. You're either looking forward or looking in the rearview mirror.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And I think that's just a scary place to be, because then you wake up and you're, 75 years old and you haven't lived your life yet.
Right.
So. And
there's a saying I always say in my head is, I read a lot, so I remember a lot of the stuff, and I lead a lot, so I feel like I read a lot of times to not just grow for myself. I do that for sure, but to give back to the people that I'm leading.
Do the same, yeah.
Right. And so, and I think a lot of people do that in a position of leadership, or at least I assume they do. But there's a little saying that says, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. Today's the present, so treat it like that. Right? Today's the present. And so that just sums up the whole conversation we had is it's about today.
Yeah.
And how do we get better today?
Right.
And excuse me, failing is part of it.
Right.
And stop being afraid to fail. Stop being afraid to do that. It hurts, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's not that easy.
Yeah.
But the scars have stories, and stories have success, and success builds legacy. And that's what we're after, And so I don't know any of this stuff if I haven't just been submitted thousands of times.
Right.
So
not just reading this from a textbook, you've lived it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Right.
Well,
so
thank you for
being
man. Here.
Thanks for the opportunity, brother.
Thanks for sharing the wisdom. You. And if people want to catch up more with what you're up to, how can they follow you? And
yeah, on Insta, I'm on all social media, but I'll respond to you the most on Instagram, and I actually do it personally. So nice. Coach Marc Montoya, MARC Montoya. If you guys want to hit me up, I'm always down to have a discussion or chat or interact.
Beautiful.
So thank you for your opportunity.
Oh man, no, it's been so good. I feel like we could go for another hour or more. So time, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening in, and we'll catch up with you soon. Later.